What's good with the YouTube? You already know, Big Flacco with a convict's perspective, man. And once again, man, we're going to bring back one that I did about 7 months ago on Real Talk with Flacco. But this is now convict's perspective, man. We're going to be talking about Salinas, a known NF stronghold, man. Has a long, extensive history, man. One of the first Norteno varios actually came out of Salinas. I think I discussed it in this video, which was Salinas East Market. And for years, man, it's been like a mecca, a stronghold, a place that's recognized. The individuals that are bred out of this city, Salinas, are always of high caliber. A lot of the carnales, right, have came out of Salinas. So Salas has that, you know what I mean? From back in the days, man, anybody will tell you, man, that airport, there was a lot of bodies jumped there back in the days, man. A lot of carnales, a lot of hermanos, a lot of first wave NR members. But within this town as well, man, you got to keep in mind that those other opposition factions, such as, you know, the Sureños out there, or some of the degenerate groups, they're actually about that action too, man. You have to be in the city of Salinas if you plan on even existing or living, man. That's one town, man. As a dropout or as a Sureño, it's going to be hard, man. But even them Sureños out there, man, are with that action, man. You know, anyways, we're going to get to the video, man. It's a pretty good one. A lot of details, a lot of information. But even then, we didn't cover everything. This is your boy Flacco, Convict's Perspective. Let's get it. And as you can tell by the title, man, we're going to get straight to it. Salinas Califas, the big bad salad bowl where they get active. Okay, this bill, you know, I'm going to go into this, and at the end, there's always going to be a message, man. So let's first and foremost talk about Salinas. Salinas has a very long, extensive history within the NF and Norteno movement. I would say one of the first ever varios that was banging Norte was probably the Salinas East Market, Marqueta, right around the time of the fruit stand and so forth, which I think they established themselves probably around the years of 74 to 76, somewhere in that time range. They've always had very influential members, from Perico to MC to Black Jess to current members like Matt Rocha, Baki, Stork, and so forth. Salas has always been a recognized stronghold presence area, you know what I mean, to where they breed individuals into that life. It's pretty much generational. Me personally, I have a very long, extensive history with a lot of individuals out there in Salas. At one point in my career, I was placed on special assignment, living in the San Jose area, yet functioning under the Salinas Regiment. I was able to work under 4 different carnals out there in that area, as well as I had a lot of other interactions and dealings with a few other carnales and our soldados out there on the streets, prison, and so forth. And it's not just Salinas, it's the whole Monterey County. The caliber of manpower that comes out of there is always quality. And I have a couple theories based upon that. One, Salinas is a very close-knit community. It's a rural area. It's surrounded by cities like Gonzales, Soledad, Greenfas, you know, Prunedale, Castroville. Very rural area. Traditional farmero land. You know, a lot of homeboys out of those areas used to, either their families worked in the fields or they even worked in the fields. I've heard stories from numerous homeboys. So they bring that Huesca culture to them, you know, the struggle within the people. At a young age, they are already being taught and bred into that lifestyle because it's all that they know. They're born into it in a lot of senses. Either they have cousins or uncles or dads that are either familianos or insoldados. Everyone is somehow connected out there. There's numerous varios out there, and the way that they operate really strictly. They almost operate the hoods like a regiment, believe it or not, like a small crew. That's how much impact the NF has had on this area. Now, don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that they haven't had turmoil in their past, as we already know, regarding the MC, Copas, Rico, Lobo, and so forth, when the power play and power struggle occurred. But in the end, though, no matter what the scenario was, Salinas was always going to get back in course. The morale at times may have been, you know, lessened and a lot of feelings were out there, but eventually there's enough solid individuals coming out of there that they were able to get that town on track. Some of the individuals I personally know from out there, Bubba, Wino, Chico Rose, Chopper, Suave, Cyclone, all kinds, man. I know so many individuals from out that way, man. It's ridiculous. A lot of soldados. And the thing that I've always noticed about Salinas is that always been able to maintain a grasp over his communities, to where they have basically when you talk about a controlled territory, Salinas is one of them. Every individual out there aspires to be someone within that collective. Like I said, it's bred into them. You know, I've seen individuals that started off as Northerners early in their career that are now NF members, believe it or not. And it's just that strive and the education and indoctrination of its soldados that a lot of C's have been able to have a hands-on approach. And see, that's the influence, is that they've been able to recruit a lot of C's from different areas. And in those areas, these individuals have been pretty solid and righteous in their hood. And therefore, a lot of these individuals will assist the regiment. It's like, it doesn't even have to be asked, you know. Whereas during my time here in San Jose, you'd have certain hoods that did want to obligate themselves and assist, but there was a little resistance because there was a lot of faulty politics that were being played, you know, and a lot of things were being exposed more in San Jose as opposed to Salinas. That's the one thing I noticed from my dealings with Salas, was that its COVID operations were kind of concealed even with its regimental members. Like I said, you know, I would go out there, like for instance, Powder from Salas, you know. I got in contact with him through Jimmy Wino Zarowski at that time, because he was supposed to fall under his regiment. And so Wino put us in contact. Wino went MIA, me and Powder started communicating. He was incommunicado at the time, but he wanted to start getting his regiment established out there in the streets. So I started to tell him that I had to connect on work. So I started to supply him out there with what he was doing around 2001. And the way we operated was that we had a set location to where I would meet his runner. When I would meet his runner, he would always be there on time. And he was told not to even discuss or talk to me or tell me his name. It was just a business transaction, boom, boom. And we were done. One time he elected to make a comment. I told Powder what dude said, and Powder ended up having to find the dude. And the way that I met with Powder was I'd meet at a set location that would be totally opposite of where we were going. Then we would get in our cars and we'd go different routes, get off the freeway and get back on. Then when we get to a set location, like I remember going to a pick and pull a few times, and then we'd walk in the pick and pull, then we would discuss business. It was full security to the extreme. Same thing when I met Wino. First time I met Wino, went over to the homeboy Chop's house, just going over there to hang out as homeboys. Like I said, I had friendships out there in Salinas. It just wasn't business activities. Met Boxer that day as well. Me and Wino take off to go get some alcohol. And in the process, man, Wino was he was young. He's probably about 23 years old. You know what I'm saying? And he was all disco down, kind of like with some Stacey Adams and stuff, and a haircut that looked more like the raver style. And so I asked him, I go, "Are you a brother?" And he looked at me like, "What you mean by brother?" And I looked at him, I'm like, I wonder what his status is now. You know what I'm saying? Just by his aura. Very attentive. You know what I mean? Very looking and observing everything and not saying much, but was a pretty female dude. Later on, I found out he was a carnal. Later on, I ended up having to report to him. Same thing with him. You know, I had a carnal that was MIA that needed a place to stay. He was absconding. I drove all the way to Salinas, meet Cyclone Montoya, when Cyclone just got pulled as a C at that time. This was the World Series day when the Angels came back on the Giants when they were like 7 down. That's the day when Cyclone got his status confirmed. So that's about, what, 20 years ago now? That's how far we go back. So same thing. Follow Cyclone. We do the same route. We get to a location in Marina, which was an isolated area. Then Wino comes. You know what I'm saying? Takes care of the female. We had to take off, but that's the way the security precautions were out there. There was things that were going on that were not exposed to everybody, as opposed to other areas where everybody knows everybody's business. And that's the one thing I liked about, as much attention and heat as there was in Salinas, there wasn't a lot of information that was being divulged. It wasn't being revealed. And I could able just to do what I needed to do and just submit my monthlies, and that's it, and stay out the way. And it kind of helped me out with my security, because I didn't have to involve them on anything I was doing, as long as I didn't overstep any boundaries, which I always did in the San Jose Regiment. Okay, but I always jokingly say things about Salas, man, that, you know, a newborn, when he comes into this world, you know, his first words are going to be the first bonds. I mean, that's the kind of generational path that they're taken upon. You know what I'm saying? You'll talk to people from Salas from different hoods, and they'll say, you know, I was born into this. This is the life that I live, you know.
and they continue down that pattern. It's just a cycle of events, that homeboys get out, they go to the pen, their moms, their dads, their grandmas, their grandpas, uncles, aunts, cousins. Everybody sometimes is so close knit and connected that they're all involved in some form or fashion within the politics out there on the streets. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not any different than any other particular group. And what I mean by that is they also will have, politics that are being played behind the scenes that may be corrupt and so forth, man. But at least when it comes to Salas, a lot of that's not being exposed. That's not to say that Salinas is any better than any other area up in Northern California, because there's a lot of areas that straight get active, like Stockton, Oakland, Hayward, San Fran, San Jose. But it's being a small city, right? Which it has maybe 150 to 200,000 people. I don't know. I may be wrong. And the quality of individuals and how they've been able to continue this path of educating their young out there, the path continues. It's brought in them to, when they get out there to grow up, everybody wants to aspire to be NF members. It's very rarely that individuals do not want to get involved in assisting the regiment in some form or fashion. Some do it in a limited role, some in an expanded role. And I've seen a lot of Northerners, right, personally, that were sharper than a lot of soldados that came out of Salas. Their educational attainments, their comprehension, their set procedures, everything was to a T. And so, therefore, when you met a lot of people from Salinas, you always had a set expectation. This is what you expected here. They were up to this par. Whereas you go to different areas like Contra Costa County or Sonoma County and, different areas, they may not have that level of education. And it's not their fault. It's just the quality of competent individuals with status, ranking, and education are not always prevalent in those areas. Whereas Salinas, there's a whole bunch of them. I mean, at any given time, you could have anywhere from like 5 to 10 C's out there and about 40 to 50 hermanos. That's really common out there, But let's get into a little bit more, man. There's been a lot of things that have occurred out there. The feds have actually established shop out there to where they're always scrutinizing the NF's activities. I believe that they have shop out there in Marina just for an NF task force. That's what I've heard before. I'm pretty sure that's pretty accurate, but that's how much attention that Salinas NF members have. And see, a lot of people call it the street headquarters, and I would never label it that. I just think that they're a lot more well regarded and respected at times because of their strong influence. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of it goes back to them being close to Chole, Soledad, but it's just how they bred their soldiers out there. There was a lot of, they were able to control it. As some cities get bigger, like Stockton and Sakura and San Jose, you get more people out there. You have a lot harder time to control that whole area that you've been given authority over. Therefore, it's harder to have the type of influence that you want. Whereas in this community, you got a city that's very much smaller with individuals in almost every hood that have influence and impact. And see, even the fucking dropouts out there with the business, and there's not a lot of dropouts, to be honest with you. From when I was functioning with the Salinas Regiment, they had one fucking rule, okay? If anybody committed any serious crimes against the people, you had full authorization to whack them if you wanted. Now, if they didn't commit no serious crimes, like say they just laid it down or so forth, you were able to do business actions with them to benefit financially. I mean, that's what I was straight given. That was the directives I was told. And it was as long as they didn't commit certain crimes against the people. So out there, people know the game. If you fall out of bad favor, you better be with it or move. The other ones, you just better be out the way. Salinas always has that reputation. Even up to a couple of years ago, they were whacking people out there in the streets, involving Chente from Salas when he was in charge. And so it's one area you don't want to play around in. The caliber of gang banging out there is pretty high. The Sureños out there are very active. They're with the business as well. They have to be because they're getting hit from all sides, man. And, from the stories that I hear when you go out there and what you see, it's a common way of life. You know what I'm saying? Gang banging. It still has that gang banging type of aura when you go out there. As opposed to a lot of other areas, the clapping and smacking motherfuckers is still the same, but the level of what it's behind is a little bit less. Out there, it's still the gang banging. You know what I mean? Let's get these fools. Red on red is no longer an issue. You know what I'm saying? And, I think one of the most key areas out there in Salinas was when when Matt Rocha ended up killing Gordo. That case was kind of a very, very big issue because up until then, the Sureños out there were pretty much not trying to make any type of push against the Salinas Norteños. I've been told this by one of the ones that founded that group, who was originally from LA. He said that killing is what set them off and made them decide that they had to fight back. But before that, they didn't want nothing with it. They didn't want nothing with it in the Salinas Norteños. So they're out there too. But Salinas in general, man, they got from Chinatown, man, to all those areas, man. I know homeboys from a lot of those hoods, Baronda, Bahamas and all that, Marqueta, Casitas. And there's been a lot of good dudes I've met over the years, man. Not just the individuals I met, but dudes I built relationships with, man, and friendships. There was always something about individuals from certain areas that they had that ability to be influential and lead. And that's what I've seen in a lot of the people from Salas. And see, sometimes people have misread or misstated or felt that Salinas gets preferential treatment or favoritism, which I disagree. I just think that they have a lot of influential members, especially in the feds currently, that people kind of have a lot of respect and regard for. Where they're at now within their plight, I'm saying, it's going to continue. But the message behind this is this, man, is, this way of life in Salinas is generational. It's passed on from one generation to the next. And see, there's not as much opportunity in that area as opposed to, the Bay Area. Santa Clara County, had the big issue of, not a big issue, but it had the Silicon Valley boom, the tech boom. And it provided a lot of opportunity and jobs that normal people that were living in that lifestyle, like young females and so forth, were able to go out there and get a career and so forth. So you have less involvement in family members as opposed to what you see now in Salinas, to where everybody's connected somehow. Your cousin, your aunt, your uncle, the dad, the mom, the sisters, whatever. There's involvement there. Everybody just, and it keeps it close knit. It keeps the togetherness, going forward. And, kids are exposed to a lot, and people don't realize that. So when you're having get-togethers and you're expanding business, and that's all you see around you is a gang activity, as a gang member, your kids are going to gravitate towards that. And see, that's the only negative thing I see about Salinas is they're so out front about the unity and carnalism of the people, but as far as in the negative aspect, as far as business dealings, being about taking out Sureños, being about making money, those are all the focal points. The involvement in NF activities. So at a young age, people start to aspire to be the same thing. Like you see in the documentary with Mando Frias with his dad. That is a very exact type of sequence that occurs out there in Salinas. The kids are bred that way. They're taught. They're educated, and they follow in the footsteps of their family members. They're born into it, Not to say other areas, they're not born into it, because they are. When you're born into poverty, drug addiction, and gangs, a lot of times that's going to influence your upbringing. But see, a lot of other areas, man, certain family members have been able to get out. But even in these areas where people have been able to get out and get good jobs, they're still intertwined with that gang atmosphere. Therefore, it influences everybody. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody's somehow involved. Now, they may not be on the level of the NF activities and regimental business out there, but they know their part in place and they stay in their position. Which, like I said, it's a cycle of a continuous trend. And see, I have one question for anybody out there that's currently active and extremely in the mix. And this is a real question, man. And this is something that people have to consider and really look at when they look at the whole overall agenda of what they're pushing. And that's going to be as a parent, do you really want to see your kids follow in the same footsteps, to become a gang member, to be involved in that life? Because we know where it leads. It leads to 35 to life sentences. It leads to death on the streets. It leads to a numerous sequence of cycles that continues. When are we going to break that cycle? As an individual, as a father, and even as an ex-gang member, when I was fully active in this mix, I would never want any of my kids to follow in the same footsteps of what I was leading, because I knew what I was doing was wrong. And see, this is the thing that people have to realize, that Salinas in general continues that path, and it's up to the individuals out there to break that cycle. Because when you're having these get-togethers and you have homeboys going in and people coming out getting shot and going to funerals and so forth, kids are exposed to all that. You know what I mean? You got to isolate and maybe not shelter your kid, but you got to correct them at a young age, even if you're a gang member, not to lead in the same path. And see, that's the problem in some of these communities, you know, down up north and down south, because it's so invested with just one type of notion of gang violence and gang activities and criminal activities that as young kids, you're exposed to it. That's all you know. You think that that's your path. You got to show your kids that there's a way better way of living than what they're doing, than what you're doing, you know, because you can go back in some of these hoods that there's 3-4 generations of family members that have all been from the same hood. You know, look at the situation with Tizo. You know, his dad pressured him into being a gang member and being about it. And you got to be down. You got to be a killer. He became a killer. Look at Night Owl. Same thing. He was already getting pulled when he was in YA. You know, was involved to the extreme. His mom was doing the same thing. He was running around with MC at a young age. And they just whacked his mom not that long ago. You know, that's where this life leads you. And people got to realize, man, that either you separate yourself from it or you're going to have to go full force. But even if you're involved in it, man, there has to be ways to isolate the kids in the future. You know, I don't think that's the bad part is the thinking process up here gets that this is the only way of living. Therefore, this is what I'm going to pass on to my kids. This is my legacy. Give your kids a whole new legacy. Show them that, hey, this isn't the way of life. Show them a whole different direction. If you really care about your kid, then you're going to never want them to be involved in what you're involved in. And it used to sadden me in certain areas, not Salinas, but other areas as well, where you would see the pops would already be influencing a kid that's 14, 15 years old about gang banging on Sureños. I mean, what type of parent is that? You know, we got to raise our morals and our values, and that maybe we can't change because of what we're doing, but we can do it for our kids. We can show them a whole different direction, more community involvement, more positiveness. You know what I'm saying? Because the longevity of success is going to be way more of value if you do things the right way. Get a job, establish companies, and so forth. Help Pente out that way. You know what I'm saying? Not by helping them out by, hey, here's a gun, here's some dope, go put in some work. That's not going to ever end right. We all know that. So these are things that we have to consider out there, you know, as parents and as role models in our community. Because areas like Salinas are not just in Salinas. They're all throughout California, all throughout the country. And we can't let the stigma, being that this is where we grew up, this is what it's about, affect our future. Because too often or not, it has happened. And we didn't have platforms like mine and others that were able to touch on these issues. And so now it's important for people to get the message across. I'm not anti-gang and I'm not pro-gang. I'm about helping individuals not have to make those same choices and mistakes that I made. And as individuals, whether you're active or inactive, you should feel the same way about your own kids and be a better example. You know? Anyways, little spill about Salinas. A lot of love for a lot of the Granada's out there that I've met throughout the years, man. I can't say personally I have any bad experience with any seasons from out there. Actually, the relationships were always cool. They always treated me right. Much respect. You know, had a lot of friendships out there, man. But, you know how that goes when you're on this side now. Anyways, it's your boy Flacco, always keeping it real. This is my personal view, my personal perspective. This is what I seen, what I was going through. I'm out.